Why was she standing in the rain, gripping her rifle like it was the only thing keeping her upright? The night was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made you hear things that weren't there. The hiss of her own breath in the earpiece, the faint drip of water rolling down her cheek, mixing with the sweat she pretended wasn't fear. She shifted her stance, boots pressing into the mud, and for the first time in hours she allowed herself to glance at her reflection in the shattered glass of a window beside her. A woman's face stared back, weathered, determined, but beneath the dirt, beneath the streaks of rain, there was something else, something no one else could see. Shame. She had carried it since yesterday, since the moment she made a choice that no soldier ever wants to admit to. Her teammates didn't know, not yet. They thought she was steady, unbreakable, the kind of operator who didn't flinch. But last night, when the firefight had turned to chaos, she had frozen for half a heartbeat too long. And in that half-beat, something irreversible had happened. She still saw it when she closed her eyes, a hand reaching for her, a voice calling out, then silence. And now, tonight, she stood here, rain soaking her uniform, weapon tight in her grip, knowing that what came next would either bury her in that shame forever, or give her a chance to rewrite it. A scratch of static cut across her earpiece. Vega status. She exhaled, pressing the button on her shoulder. Her voice came out steady, trained, controlled. Perimeter secure. Vega, that was the name they called her. Not her real one, but it was the only one that mattered here. She scanned the street again, eyes narrowing. Every shadow was a threat. Every flicker of movement could mean life or death. Somewhere in the darkness, their target was moving. And somewhere deeper in her chest, the weight of yesterday pressed harder. The mission was simple on paper. Secure the compound, extract the package, get out alive. But nothing ever stayed simple when boots hit the ground. And tonight, nothing felt simple inside her own skin. She adjusted her sling, pulled the scope to her eye, and scanned the upper floors of a building that leaned like it was too tired to keep standing. The city around them was a skeleton of what it had been. Broken windows, collapsed roofs, walls riddled with scars of old battles. A ghost of war, and she was just another shadow moving through it. But there was more than just the mission tonight. There was something she hadn't told them. Her hand tightened on the rifle as the memory clawed back up, the heat, the screaming, the split-second decision that hadn't come fast enough. She shoved it down. Not now. Not when every second mattered. A whisper of movement to her left snapped her back to the present. She pivoted, sight aligned, heart punching against her ribs. It was Ortiz. He raised a hand, eyes wide beneath the edge of his helmet. No words, just a signal, something ahead. She nodded, low and deliberate, and followed him forward. Their boots made almost no sound, trained steps absorbed by the mud. Every sense was alive, the smell of wet earth, the distant hum of a generator, the faint metallic taste of adrenaline at the back of her throat. They crouched near the corner of a crumbling wall, the air thick with anticipation. Vega glanced at Ortiz. His breathing was heavier than usual. She caught the quick rise and fall of his chest, the way his jaw flexed. "You good?" she whispered. He gave a tight nod, but his eyes betrayed him. Fear, the kind that creeps in quiet before the bullets start. She knew that feeling too well. For a second she wanted to tell him she wasn't good either, that she still saw the face of the one she didn't save, that her hands still trembled when no one was looking. But words like that didn't belong out here. They stayed locked inside, swallowed with the rain. So she only said, "Stay close." They moved. The street ahead was a corridor of shadows. Broken streetlights flickered, buzzing faintly before dying again. The air smelled faintly of oil and smoke. Somewhere far off, a dog barked, sharp and lonely. Her ears strained for every sound, and then a door creaked. Her rifle was up before she thought. Fingers steady, breath caught. The door swung wider, a faint sliver of light spilling out, and a figure stepped into it. Small, Not what she expected. A child. Vega's throat tightened. He couldn't have been more than 8. Barefoot, shirt hanging loose on his thin frame, eyes wide as he stared at the 2 armed soldiers in the rain. Ortiz froze beside her. The boy didn't speak, just stood there silent, as though he'd seen ghosts before and knew exactly what they looked like. Vega lowered her weapon slightly, but the tension in her chest only grew, because children in war zones were never just children. Sometimes they carried messages, sometimes weapons, sometimes nothing but the weight of a world that had stolen their childhood. And sometimes they carried reminders. The boy's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment she saw the face from yesterday. Not the same, but close enough to rip the air from her lungs. She blinked, rain running into her eyes, and when she looked again, it was only the boy. Fragile, real, alive. She lowered her weapon fully. "Go," she whispered. The boy hesitated, then darted into the alley, swallowed by the dark. Ortiz let out a shaky breath. "That could've." "I know," she cut him off. But what she didn't say, what she couldn't, was that she'd just seen yesterday staring back at her. And that choice, that whisper of mercy, had been for her as much as it was for the boy. They pressed on. Minutes felt like hours. Every turn of a corner, every step into the unknown was another chance for yesterday to repeat itself. She replayed it in her head, the half-second delay, the scream that followed. She could still feel the weight of the hand that slipped from hers. Not tonight. Her earpiece crackled again. All units converge, compound sighted. She swallowed hard, shifting the rifle against her shoulder. The compound, the heart of the mission, the place where all of this could either redeem her or damn her completely. She caught Ortiz's eyes. He gave her a nod, silent trust passing between them. And as they moved toward the target, Vega whispered inside her own chest, words no one else could hear. "This time I won't fail." What waited inside those walls, and why did her hands feel heavier with every step she took toward them? The compound loomed ahead, silent and dark, but silence in a place like this was never trust. It was a warning. Vega crouched low behind a stack of broken concrete, the rain easing now into a mist that clung to her skin. She let her eyes trace the jagged outline of the building. 2 stories, a collapsed roofline, windows blacked out, no light, no movement. Yet the air carried something, a weight, like a breath being held. Her earpiece buzzed softly. Team Alpha in position, awaiting breach. Her heart pounded once, then steadied. She shifted her rifle, checked the chamber, and nodded to Ortiz. He tapped his helmet, ready. They moved with precision, stepping through puddles that reflected the fractured world above them. Each step, each breath counted, and all the while her chest tightened with the memory of what had happened the night before. It wasn't the firefight itself that haunted her. She'd seen plenty. It was the pause, that tiny fracture of hesitation. The second when instinct should have taken over but didn't. She had never forgiven herself for that, and maybe she never would. Now every doorway, every shadow felt like a chance to test her again. Ortiz stopped suddenly, holding a fist in the air. Vega froze. A sound faint, rhythmic, boots scuffing against concrete, someone inside. They waited, breath shallow. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. A moment stretched, suspended. Then a cough, muffled, and the sound of a chair scraping. Vega exhaled slowly, pressing her cheek tighter against the rifle. 2 o'clock window, Ortiz whispered. She adjusted, scope narrowing in. A faint silhouette moved across the black glass, just enough to know this wasn't an empty shell of a building. Her earpiece clicked again. Breach in 5. 5 seconds, that's all. 5 seconds until noise, chaos, fire. She flexed her hand around the grip, muscles tense. 4. She thought of the boy, the one who'd stared at her like he knew her shame, the one she'd let go. 3. She thought of the teammate she'd lost yesterday, the one whose hand had slipped. 2. She thought of her father, the last words he'd ever said to her before she chose this path. 1. The explosion shattered the silence. The side door of the compound blew inward, dust and splinters bursting into the rain. Shouts followed, voices shouting orders, some panicked, some calm. The night cracked open, alive with motion. Vega surged forward, rifle raised, Ortiz on her flank. They entered through the breach, every sense on fire. The air inside reeked of damp concrete and oil, thick with dust. Shadows darted across hallways, and the noise of boots echoed like thunder in a cave. Gunfire erupted upstairs, sharp, violent cracks tearing through the compound. Screams followed. Vega ducked behind a support pillar, heart hammering. She scanned right hallway clear, left a flash of movement. Her finger twitched, but she held, waited. The shape reappeared, and this time she fired. The crack of her rifle was deafening inside the tight walls. The figure dropped. Ortiz's voice cut through the noise, clear left. They pushed deeper. Every room was a gamble. Every corner could hold death. Vega's boots slipped slightly on the dust-slick floor as she pressed against the wall, shoulder brushing peeling paint. Her mind screamed at her not to pause again, not to hesitate. Move, breathe, act. They turned into a narrow corridor, lit only by the faint red glow of a broken emergency light. The shadows stretched long, twisted, and there at the end of the hall a door, reinforced, heavy. Ortiz exhaled. That's it. The package. The reason they were here. But as Vega approached, something shifted in her chest, a pressure, an echo of the voice she hadn't silenced. Her teammate from last night, the one she didn't save, had been carrying something too, something classified. And when she failed him, it hadn't just been his life that ended. It had been the mission. This door, this moment, it felt like déjà vu. Her hand tightened around the handle of the rifle, knuckles pale. Ortiz glanced at her. On your mark. She should have answered, should have nodded steady like she always did. But her voice stuck. She looked at the reinforced steel, and all she saw was the hand slipping away again and again in endless replay. Her silence stretched a beat too long. Ortiz noticed. His eyes narrowed. You good? She blinked. Rainwater or maybe sweat dripped into her eyes. She forced herself to nod. Yeah. But inside, the truth screamed otherwise. They stacked against the wall. Ortiz set the charge. The faint beep of the timer filled the hall. Vega closed her eyes for half a breath. She remembered the boy's face, the shame of yesterday, and she whispered, barely audible, not again. The charge detonated. The door splintered inward, smoke curling into the air. They surged in, rifles raised. The room was stark dim, lined with crates and old filing cabinets, and in the center a man, hands bound, hood over his head. The package. Alive. Ortiz moved quickly, sweeping the corners, checking for threats. Clear. Vega advanced, covering him, her heart thundering. She reached the figure, yanked the hood off. The man squinted against the light. His face was battered, swollen, but his eyes burned with defiance. Vega's breath caught. She knew that face. Not personally, but from the file, from the briefing, from the reason this mission existed at all. The asset wasn't just anyone. He was a translator, a local who had once worked with them, betrayed his own people to save hers, then vanished. Rumors said he'd been killed, but here he was, alive. And he was looking at her with something more than defiance, something closer to recognition. She swallowed hard. The shame pressed tighter, because yesterday, the one who died in front of her, he had been the one who vouched for this man. And she had let him fall. Ortiz crouched, cutting the man's restraints. Got him, let's move. But Vega didn't move. Not yet, her eyes locked with the assets. And for a split second she saw something there. Not gratitude, not relief. Something darker. Ortiz grabbed her arm. Vega, now. She tore her gaze away, forcing herself into motion. They pulled the man to his feet, guided him toward the breach point. Gunfire still rattled upstairs, distant but urgent. The mission wasn't over, not by a long shot. As they moved through the corridor, the asset stumbled, weak from confinement. Vega caught his weight, steadied him. And in that brief touch he whispered, so soft only she could hear, "You were too late yesterday." Her blood froze. She whipped her head toward him, eyes wide, but his face was blank again, unreadable. He stumbled forward, silent. Ortiz didn't notice. But Vega's chest burned. He knew. Somehow this man knew what she carried. And the question clawed at her, louder than the storm outside, louder than the gunfire still raging above. If he knew her shame, what else did he know? Why did his words feel like a knife, slipped carefully between the ribs, where no one else could see the wound? Vega moved through the hallway like a machine, weapon raised, steps controlled. But inside her mind wasn't steady, not anymore. "You were too late yesterday." The words replayed in her skull, twisting, echoing. She told herself she misheard, that the man was delirious, half-broken from confinement. That's all. But his eyes, the way he'd looked at her after saying it, those eyes told her otherwise. And now she had to walk him out. The compound pulsed with chaos. Gunfire cracked above them. Shouts in a language that Vega half understood rattled down the stairwell. Dust fell from the ceiling in fine grains. Every sound said the same thing. They were running out of time. Ortiz hauled the asset forward, one hand gripping the man's arm, the other steadying his weapon. Vega stayed close, eyes slicing every angle, every doorway. Her trigger finger pulsed with the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Extraction point's 2 blocks south," Ortiz muttered, breath sharp. "We move fast, we make it." They reached the breach hole. Rain slapped against their faces as they spilled back outside. The night air hit Vega like ice. She scanned the street, her nerves stretched thin. Empty, too empty. She knew better than to trust silence twice. "Go," she said. They pushed into the open. Boots splashed in puddles. The asset stumbled, nearly collapsing. Vega caught him, fingers digging into his arm, steadying him again. His breath rasped, wet and shallow, and then low enough for only her again. "You let him die." Her grip faltered. She whipped her eyes toward him, rage sparking. "What did you say?" But Ortiz barked over them. "Contact front." Muzzle flashes ripped the night apart. Bullets chewed into walls, sending chips of stone flying. Vega yanked the asset down, pressed him against the ground, and fired back. Each shot cracked sharp in her ears, the recoil biting against her shoulder. Ortiz's voice roared through the chaos. "2 down, push right." Vega shoved the asset forward, rising to cover their flank. Her vision tunneled rain, gunfire, smoke. The air stank of cordite and wet earth. She fired, reloaded, fired again. And when the silence finally fell, broken only by the hiss of rain, 3 bodies lay motionless on the street. Her chest heaved. Ortiz spat into the mud, shaking his head. "Too close." "Keep moving," Vega said. Her voice was flat, cold. They dragged the asset forward again, weaving through alleys slick with water. The city felt alive around them, every window a watching eye, every rooftop a potential rifle. Vega's nerves buzzed. The asset stumbled again, coughing hard. Blood flecked his lips. Vega gripped his arm tighter, but inside, her fury burned hotter than her concern. He had said it again. Different words, same blade. "You let him die." How could he know? She bit down hard on the thought, forcing herself to focus on the street ahead. But the questions gnawed anyway. Was it just a guess, a trick, or had someone told him? And if he knew that, what else did he know about her? They reached a narrow alley, walls towering on both sides, graffiti washed pale by the rain. It was the fastest route to the extraction point, but it was also a choke point, a kill box. Ortiz scanned it, jaw tight. Bad ground. It's the only way, Vega said. He looked at her, searching her face. For a second she thought he saw through the mask, the tension, the anger eating at her, but he only nodded. Let's move. They pushed into the alley. Their footsteps echoed. The asset wheezed with each step, his weight dragging heavier on Vega's arm. She gritted her teeth, shouldering him forward. Halfway through, Ortiz froze. Vega stopped instantly. The sound was faint, almost drowned by the rain. A click, metal sharp. Trap! Down, Ortiz shouted. The explosion tore through the alley, blinding light and concussive force slamming into them. Vega hit the ground hard, ears ringing. Dust and debris rained from above. Her vision blurred, the world spinning. She forced herself up, gasping. Ortiz was on the ground, blood streaking his temple, groaning. The asset lay sprawled beside her, alive but shaken. And out of the smoke, shapes. Armed men poured in from both ends of the alley, rifles raised. Shadows against firelight. Trapped. Vega's pulse roared in her ears. She dragged Ortiz to cover, her rifle spitting fire. The alley lit up with muzzle flashes, deafening cracks bouncing off stone walls. Bullets sparked, whining inches from her face. The asset crawled behind her, covering his head. Ortiz groaned, trying to lift his weapon. His hand trembled, blood dripping down his arm. "We're pinned," he rasped. Vega's jaw clenched. She counted rounds, eyes darting, 10 left, then 8, then 5. The enemy closed in. Shadows moving closer, voices shouting. Her muscles ached, lungs burning. Her shame burned hotter. Yesterday had been one hand she couldn't hold, one life she couldn't save. Not again. She fired her last shots, dropped 2 men in the smoke. The others pressed closer. Ortiz coughed blood. "Go take the package." "No," she snapped. He gripped her wrist, eyes fierce even through pain. "You don't get both, choose." Her heart tore in two. Ortiz, her anchor, her partner through endless nights like this. And the asset, the mission, the reason they were here. And between them, her shame, coiled tight around her chest. The enemy footsteps thundered closer. The asset's voice cut through, low and poisonous. "You failed yesterday. Will you fail again?" Vega's breath shook. Her finger tightened on the trigger of a weapon that had no more rounds. And then, somewhere in the distance, salvation. The roar of engines, the chop of blades. The extraction bird. Searchlights cut through the rain, sweeping across rooftops. The enemy faltered, shouting in panic. Some scattered. Vega seized the moment. She slung Ortiz's arm over her shoulder, hauling him up with everything she had left. The asset stumbled behind, dragged by her fury as much as her strength. They pushed forward through smoke, through rain, through the fire of their own breaking bodies, toward the light. Bullets still chased them, snapping past, but the helicopter's guns answered, rattling fire into the night. They broke free of the alley, sprinting into the open. Mud splashed, lungs screamed. And then arms reached down from the open ramp of the bird, pulling Ortiz inside, dragging the asset after him. Vega was last. She grabbed the edge, muscles trembling, and hauled herself in as rounds smacked against the armored frame. The ramp slammed shut. The bird lifted, engines screaming, pulling them skyward. Silence fell inside, just the roar of the rotor, the breath of the living. Ortiz lay pale, blood soaking his sleeve, eyes half shut. Medics swarmed him, hands working fast. The asset sat slumped, head bowed, silent again. And Vega sat across from him, rifle limp in her hands, chest heaving. She stared at him, his swollen face, his steady eyes. And she wondered, was he their salvation, or the ghost of her failure come back to break her again? Why did silence feel louder than the gunfire they just escaped? The bird shook beneath them, rotors thundering against the night sky, but inside the cabin, every sound seemed sharper. The hiss of oxygen, the rasp of Ortiz's shallow breaths, the low murmur of the medic swearing under his breath as he worked to slow the bleeding. Vega sat across from him, rain still dripping off her gear, rifle resting useless across her lap. Her chest rose and fell with the rhythm of someone who hadn't taken a full breath since yesterday. Ortiz's face was gray, eyes half shut, lips pale. The medic's hands were red now, slick with his blood. He shouted for more gauze, for pressure, for anything to hold the tide back. Vega clenched her fists until her gloves creaked. She wanted to move, to help, to do something, but her place wasn't there. Not this time, not again. She caught Ortiz's gaze for a moment. Even in the haze, he found her. His lips moved, whispering something she couldn't hear over the engines. She leaned forward, close enough to catch the faint breath. "Don't let it be for nothing." Her throat closed. She swallowed hard and nodded once, sharp, promising without words. The medic barked louder. "He's crashing." Her heart squeezed tight, like yesterday's grip on her chest was back again, stronger. She wanted to reach out, to hold Ortiz's hand the way she'd failed to hold the other one, but her body locked. Fear, guilt, the memory of failing once already. And then, before she could move, "Stay with me, Ortiz," the medic shouted. Vega snapped her head away, jaw tight. She couldn't watch, not again. Instead, her eyes found the asset. He sat strapped into the bench seat, wrists bound again, head bowed. The light above him flickered, casting long shadows across his battered face, and when his eyes lifted, they found her instantly. He didn't blink, didn't look away. And in that silence, she heard his voice again. Words he hadn't spoken aloud this time, but she heard them anyway. "You let him die." Her stomach twisted, because maybe Ortiz was next. Her fists trembled against her knees. She wanted to leap across the cabin, to shake him, demand answers. How did he know? Who had told him? Or worse, had he been there, watching? But she didn't move. Couldn't. The bird shook with turbulence. The medic cursed louder, and Ortiz groaned like his body was trying to hold onto life by a thread. And she sat frozen. Like yesterday. Minutes stretched into an hour. Every second she expected the medic to stop, to shake his head, to say the words she feared. But somehow Ortiz clung on. Barely. Finally, the pilot's voice cut through her earpiece. Approaching base. The bird tilted, dropping altitude. Vega's stomach lurched with it, but her eyes never left the asset. He didn't speak, didn't move. Just stared, like he could see through her, through the mask she wore, into the shame buried underneath. When the wheels hit the pad and the ramp dropped, chaos erupted again. Medics rushed in, hauling Ortiz out on a stretcher. His hand dangled off the side, limp. For a fraction of a second, Vega thought of reaching for it, but she stayed seated. She told herself it was because the mission wasn't over, because someone had to guard the asset. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was afraid. Afraid to hold another hand and feel it slip away. She stayed with the asset as he was pulled out, flanked by guards. He moved slowly, body weak, but his eyes never left hers. When they reached the corridor leading into the base, he leaned just close enough, voice low, almost drowned by the noise around them. "Do you want to know who else blames you?" Her chest caved in. The words were a scalpel cutting clean through the armor she carried. She bit her tongue until blood filled her mouth. She wanted to demand what he meant, who he meant. But before she could, he was dragged ahead, disappearing through the doorway into the debrief rooms. She stood alone on the pad, rain dripping from her hair, engines whirling down into silence. For a long time she didn't move, just breathed, shallow, heavy, like her body didn't trust the air anymore. When she finally stepped inside, the halls felt too bright, too sterile. The sound of Ortiz's stretcher wheels echoed, distant now. Somewhere behind those walls his fate was being decided. Somewhere else the asset sat waiting, staring at nothing, carrying truths he had no right to know. And somewhere deeper, yesterday still lived inside her. Her boots carried her to the ready room, though she didn't remember choosing the path. She sat on the bench, peeling off her gloves one finger at a time. her hands trembling in the white fluorescent light. For the first time since last night, she let herself think it fully. It was my fault. The firefight, the scream, the hand she didn't hold long enough, the silence after. Her fault. And now Ortiz lay on a table bleeding out because she'd chosen the alley, because she hadn't said no, because hesitation was all she had left anymore. Her chest heaved. She pressed her palms into her eyes, blocking the light. For a second she wanted to quit right there, walk away, strip the uniform from her body and leave the shame on the floor. But she couldn't, because quitting wouldn't rewrite anything. Only courage would. And she didn't even know what that meant yet. The door opened. Boots entered, heavy, confident. She lifted her head. A figure stood there, tall, broad, uniform neat. A commander she barely knew. His eyes held hers for a long moment before he spoke. Ortiz is alive, for now. Relief cracked her chest, but it didn't last long. The asset wants to speak with you, only you. Her blood went cold. She stood slowly, every movement heavy like her body wanted to resist. Why me? The commander's jaw tightened. He asked for Vega by name. Her heart stopped. No one here knew her real name, not even Ortiz. Vega was a mask, a shield, a call sign. But the asset, the man who had already slipped daggers into her chest with words he should never have known, he wanted her. By name. The commander didn't notice her hesitation. He just turned, gesturing. Room 3. Vega followed, boots silent against the polished floor. Every step felt like a countdown. She knew what waited behind that door wasn't just a man. It was her shame, waiting to speak back to her. And when she entered the room, when the door closed behind her with a hollow echo, the asset lifted his eyes again. He smiled. And in the quiet, his voice was calm, steady. Hello, Vega, or should I say Elena? Her knees nearly buckled. Because that name, her real name, hadn't been spoken in years. And the way he said it told her he knew far more than yesterday. They sat across from each other in the kind of room designed to strip people bare. No windows, no clocks, just white walls, fluorescent light, and a steel table bolted to the floor. Vega lowered herself into the chair, every muscle locked tight. Her rifle wasn't with her now, just the sidearm holstered at her hip, more for comfort than real protection. The asset leaned back in his chair, wrists bound in steel cuffs, ankles chained to the floor. He looked too calm, too certain. That smile still lingered on his face, the one that told her he wasn't guessing when he said her name. He knew. Elena, he said again, softer this time, like he was savoring it. Her jaw clenched, she forced her voice steady. You don't know me. His smile widened. I know enough. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. You're going to tell me how. But he didn't. He let the silence stretch, studying her the way a surgeon studies an open wound. Finally, he said, do you want me to tell you what happened yesterday, or do you want me to tell you what happened before? Her chest tightened, her pulse hammered in her throat. She masked it with a scoff. You're not here to play games. Oh, but I am, he said smoothly, because the game is already happening and you're losing. Vega's hand twitched toward her sidearm. She didn't draw it, but the motion wasn't lost on him. Go ahead, he said, tilting his head. Shoot me. End it now. Walk out and pretend you didn't hear your own name from my lips, but you won't, you can't, because you need to know how I know. Her teeth ground together. He was right, and that made her hate him more. Talk, she demanded. He studied her again, eyes tracing her face with surgical precision. You were 19, your first deployment, a name no one remembers, a mission no one recorded, except me. Her stomach flipped. The air left her lungs like a punch. How? She stopped herself before the word escaped fully. But he caught it, his smile sharpened. How do I know? Because I was there, in the shadows, not watching you know, but watching the fallout, watching the hand you didn't hold long enough. Her throat went dry. The chair beneath her felt unstable. The light above her felt hotter, harsher. Her mask was slipping, and she knew it. The asset leaned forward now, chains clinking softly. His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate like confession. "He called your name when he died, didn't he?" Vega's fists hit the table so hard it rattled. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Enough!" Her voice was low, dangerous, trembling with rage she couldn't cage. But he didn't flinch. He only leaned closer, meeting her fire with ice. "You blame yourself. You've always blamed yourself. And now, every time someone around you bleeds, you hear it again. The same voice. The same scream. Yesterday, Ortiz. Tomorrow, someone else. Until you're alone, carrying ghosts." Her chest heaved. She wanted to deny it, to bury it deep again. But the truth was already bleeding out between them. He wasn't wrong. She'd spent years building walls, hiding behind the mask of Vega. But now, in this white room, a man in chains had torn them down with a few words. Her silence was all the proof he needed. He leaned back slowly, smile fading into something colder. "And that's why you need me." Her head snapped up. "Need you for what?" His eyes narrowed, dangerous now. "Because the men who sent me here, the men you think you're fighting, they know your weakness. And they'll use it. They already are." Her breath caught. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't just shame and ghosts. This was the mission bleeding into her wounds. She forced her voice steady. "Explain." But he didn't rush. He let her desperation hang in the air, savoring it. Finally, he said, "They know you hesitate. They know you break when blood is on your hands. They'll push until you crack. And when you do, it won't just be Ortiz or yesterday. It will be the whole unit, the whole war. And you'll carry every death like a necklace around your throat." Her pulse pounded in her ears. He leaned closer again, eyes gleaming. "Unless you let me show you how to stop it." The words slid across the table like a loaded weapon. She narrowed her eyes. "You think I'd trust you?" "I don't want your trust," he said. "I want your fear, because fear will keep you listening." Her body tensed. Every instinct screamed to walk out, to slam the door, to bury him in silence. But her legs wouldn't move. Because under the venom, under the manipulation, there was truth. Ugly, sharp truth she couldn't deny. She thought of Ortiz, pale on the stretcher, of the scream that still haunted her from yesterday, of the commander's salute she didn't deserve. And for the first time, she wondered if the asset wasn't just a prisoner. Maybe he was a mirror. Her voice was quieter now, rough around the edges. "What do you want from me?" The smile returned, slow and deliberate. "Only for you to keep me alive, long enough for me to show you the truth, about yesterday, about yourself, about the war you think you're fighting." Her hands curled into fists again, nails digging into her palms. Every instinct screamed this was wrong, dangerous, poison. But somewhere deeper, a voice whispered, "What if he's right?" The silence stretched. And then the door opened. The commander stepped in, his presence heavy enough to shift the air. He glanced between them, suspicion etched in his face. "Time up." Vega stood quickly, hiding the storm inside behind a mask of steel. She nodded once, sharp, and followed him out. But as the door closed behind her, she felt the weight of the asset's eyes still on her. And his final words echoed in her chest, louder than her own heartbeat. "Unless you let me show you how to stop it." Why did the commander look at her that way? It wasn't suspicion exactly, not anger, something quieter, a flicker of doubt. The corridor stretched long and sterile as Vega walked beside him. Fluorescent lights hummed above, a low, constant buzz that gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. She kept her stride steady, eyes forward, but inside her chest, everything was coming apart. The asset's words clung to her like smoke. "He called your name when he died, didn't he?" She wanted to shove the memory down, bury it under orders, under duty, under anything that didn't sting. But the past had a way of bleeding through no matter how tightly you wrapped it. Her commander didn't speak until they reached the end of the hall. He stopped by the door, resting his hand on the frame. "You don't let him talk too much," he said flatly. Her jaw tightened. "I didn't." His eyes slid to her, sharp but unreadable. "Good. Men like him, they're poison. Doesn't take much to rot steel if you let it sit long enough." She gave a curt nod, a soldier's nod, but behind her eyes something twisted. Because poison worked only if it found something broken to seep into. And right now, she wasn't sure how many fractures she was hiding. He studied her another moment, then pushed the door open and stepped inside. She didn't follow. Not yet. Instead, she leaned against the cool wall, pressing her palm against it as if the cold could steady her pulse. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven rhythm. She hated it, the weakness of it, the way his voice still lingered, whispering truths she hadn't given him permission to touch. "You were 19. Her throat ached. She forced the memory back into the dark, but the edges had already begun to cut through. She closed her eyes, and for a split second she wasn't in the hallway anymore. She was back in that ruined village. The smell of smoke and copper in the air, shouts echoing through stone alleys, the pop of gunfire too close, too sudden. And then him. The rookie who'd trusted her, who looked at her like she was more than she was, who screamed her name as blood spread fast through his uniform. She'd pressed her hands against the wound, useless, slippery with red. She'd whispered, hold on, don't you dare leave me." But he had. And when his eyes went empty, so did something inside her. Her eyes snapped open. The hallway returned, cold and sterile. But her hands still felt wet. She drew a sharp breath and straightened, forcing her body back into the armor of a soldier. The commander's voice carried from the room, muffled but firm. She couldn't hear words, just tone, controlled, authoritative, the way officers spoke when they wanted to keep their footing on shifting ground. She pushed away from the wall and walked. Her boots echoed in the silence, steady, measured, hiding the storm inside. When she entered the briefing room, the others were already there. Faces she knew, faces she'd trained with, bled with. They looked tired, shadows under their eyes, tension etched in every line. Ortiz's empty chair sat in the corner, untouched. She swallowed hard. The commander cleared his throat. "The mission doesn't stop, we adapt, that's what we do." His voice was iron, but it didn't ring clean. There was a tremor under it, faint but real. Vega's gaze swept the table. A few soldiers nodded, some avoided eye contact. One rubbed his temple, another clenched his jaw until the muscle twitched. They were all carrying it, not just the mission, the weight, the shame, the ghosts. And suddenly, she wasn't sure if the asset was wrong. Maybe the cracks weren't just in her, maybe they were everywhere. The commander's eyes flicked to her, just for a second, long enough for the room to notice. Long enough for her to feel the question behind it. "Can I still trust you?" Her chest tightened. She forced herself to sit straighter, face unreadable. The good soldier, the one who didn't break. But the truth was clawing under her ribs. When the briefing ended, she stayed behind. The others filed out, their boots heavy against the floor. The commander lingered, gathering papers he didn't need to gather, watching her without saying so. Finally she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut. "Why him?" The commander paused mid-motion. "What do you mean?" "The asset, why is he still alive?" He set the papers down slowly. His shoulders straightened, a subtle shift. "Because sometimes information is worth more than blood." Her eyes narrowed. "Or because you already know what he'll say." The silence between them stretched sharp and dangerous. His gaze locked on hers. For a heartbeat there was no commander and soldier. Just two people, each carrying secrets too heavy to share. Then his mask slid back on. "Get some rest, Vega. Tomorrow's another day." He turned and left. She stood there alone, fists clenched at her sides. The asset's words echoed again. They know your weakness, they'll use it. Her commander's eyes lingered in her mind, heavy with something unspoken. And for the first time, she wondered if the poison wasn't in the prisoner's chains. Maybe it was, in the people giving her orders. She exhaled slowly, the air trembling as it left her lungs. The shame of yesterday weighed on her shoulders, but tonight, something else had joined it. Doubt. And doubt was heavier than any wound. What happens when silence grows heavier than words? That was the question that hung over the barracks that night. No one said it. No one dared. But it was there, in the way eyes avoided one another, in the clench of jaws, in the restless hands polishing rifles that were already clean. Vega sat on the edge of her bunk, laces half-tied, her hands motionless. Her body should have been exhausted. Her bones ached. Her muscles screamed. But her mind was a battlefield no weapon could quiet. Ortiz's empty cot was still neatly folded, untouched. Someone had placed his boots beneath it, as if he'd walk back through the door and slip into them. But he wouldn't. Her chest tightened. Across the room, Corporal Lane muttered something under his breath, a curse maybe, or a prayer. It was hard to tell these days. Someone laughed, sharp, hollow, humorless. It cracked through the barracks like brittle glass. And just like that, the room went quiet again. Vega looked down at her boots, but her ears stayed open, listening, measuring the silence. Because silence said more than words ever could. She thought of the asset, chained in the white room, voice soft as a scalpel. They know your weakness, they'll use it. And she thought of the commander, eyes cold, refusing to answer the question she hadn't meant to ask aloud. Her hands curled into fists. She hated this, the doubt, the hesitation, the fracture inside herself that wouldn't close. But the more she tried to silence it, the louder it became. She rose quietly, moving past the rows of bunks, boots light on the floor, out into the corridor, past the cameras she knew were there, eyes always watching. Her steps carried her to the one place she wasn't supposed to be. The holding room. 2 guards stood outside, rifles slung. They straightened when they saw her. Orders, one asked. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Command sent me, debrief. The guard frowned, checked his clipboard, hesitated. But hesitation was all she needed. She fixed him with a stare sharp enough to cut. Do you want me to tell the commander you delayed me? That was enough. He shifted, muttered something under his breath, and stepped aside. The door opened with a hiss. And there he was. The asset. Still in chains, still too calm. His eyes flicked up when she entered, and that smile, not wide, not cruel, just knowing, found her again. You came back. She closed the door behind her. The sound echoed like finality. Talk, she said, now. He leaned forward, cuffs clinking softly. About what? Her voice was sharp. About them, about the men giving orders. What aren't they telling us? For a moment, he studied her in silence, as if measuring whether she was ready. Then he said, Do you know why your commander kept me alive? Her jaw tightened. To bleed you for intel. A soft laugh escaped him. If that were true, I'd already be dead. No, Alina. He kept me alive because killing me would have meant admitting the truth. Her pulse thudded in her ears. He leaned closer, his voice dropped. They sent me in not to kill, to test, to measure. Her throat tightened. Measure what? You, he whispered. Her stomach dropped. They wanted to see how you'd break, how far you'd bend before you snapped, because you're not just another soldier to them. You're leverage. You're the one piece on the board they can't quite control. Her nails dug into her palms. You're lying. He tilted his head. Am I? Then why didn't your commander answer you earlier? Why did he look at you like a problem he couldn't solve? She thought of that glance, that silence. The air in the room felt heavy, pressing down on her. Her voice came out thin. "What do you get out of telling me this?" His smile faded just slightly. "Survival. If I can make you see the cracks, maybe you'll see me as more than a prisoner. Maybe you'll need me alive." Her chest heaved once, twice. She hated him, but she hated the way his words lined up with the doubts already gnawing at her more. The door burst open. Her commander stood there, eyes sharp, jaw tight. For a second, the room froze. Vega stepped back from the table, the air thick with guilt she hadn't earned but couldn't deny. The commander's voice was steel, out now. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to explain, to justify, but nothing came. So she walked past him, past the guards, into the corridor where the walls suddenly felt narrower. Behind her, the door slammed shut. Her boots echoed on the concrete as she walked, faster now, chest tight. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the compound, where the night stretched wide and silent beyond the fence. The air outside was cool, clean, but it didn't ease the weight pressing down inside her. Because she knew what that look in the commander's eyes meant. Not suspicion, not disappointment. Something worse. It meant she'd already crossed a line. And there was no way back. The night smelled of dust and steel. Engines idled low in the distance, their hum vibrating through the ground. Boots shuffled. Weapons clicked into place. Orders were whispered in tones that carried more weariness than authority. It was the kind of silence before storms, heavy, waiting. Vega stood apart from the others, her rifle slung across her chest, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beyond the fence, the desert stretched endless under the moonlight, pale and unforgiving. Her commander's voice cut through the air. "We move in 30. No one questioned it. No one ever did. But Vega felt the words differently now, like chains tightening. She thought of the asset still chained in that white room, thought of his voice sharp as glass. They kept me alive because killing me would have meant admitting the truth. She thought of Ortiz, of the rookie who died years before, of every ghost that lingered because she hadn't been fast enough, strong enough, ruthless enough. Her hands tightened on the strap of her rifle until her knuckles went white. The commander stepped closer, his presence heavy. "You're with 2nd Squad, entry point north, clear and hold." She nodded once, a soldier's nod, automatic. But inside, something shifted. The order settled into her chest and broke apart against the jagged edges of doubt. Because what if the mission wasn't what it seemed? What if the enemy wasn't across the desert, but behind the walls of her own compound? She forced her voice steady. "Sir." He looked at her, not the glance of trust, not even suspicion, just calculation. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. And in that silence, she knew. He was already measuring how far she'd go before she broke. She turned away before her face gave her away. The squads loaded into trucks. Metal groaned, engines roared. Dust kicked up in clouds that stung the eyes. Vega climbed into the last truck, wedged between Lane and another soldier whose name she couldn't bring herself to recall in that moment. Lane gave her a nod, the kind that said, "I trust you." She nodded back, but it felt like a lie. The convoy rolled out. Through the night, headlights carved narrow tunnels of visibility into the endless dark. The trucks rattled, suspension groaning over uneven earth. No one spoke much. Just the low murmur of radios, the occasional cough, the clatter of gear shifting. Vega's gaze stayed fixed ahead, but her mind was elsewhere. In the white room, with the asset's voice threading through the silence. "They'll push until you crack, and when you do, it won't just be Ortiz, it'll be everyone." She clenched her jaw, tried to shut it out. But doubt doesn't vanish, it spreads. The trucks halted abruptly, engines cut, the night swallowed them whole. The commander's voice came over comms, "Move." Boots hit dirt, weapons came up. Shadows stretched long under the moonlight. Vega's squad advanced north, moving low and tight. The desert air was sharp in her lungs. The target compound rose ahead, squat, concrete, edges harsh against the sky. Lights glowed faint in the cracks of boarded windows. Lane whispered, "Looks too quiet." He was right. It was too quiet. Her stomach knotted. The commander's voice came again, "Execute plan." And just like that, the squad split, shadows peeling off into the night. Vega's boots crunched over gravel. Her rifle hugged her shoulder, sights fixed ahead, every sense stretched taut. They reached the entry point, a steel door, rusted, padlocked. Lane knelt, working the lock. Vega scanned the perimeter, ears straining. Nothing. To nothing. Her chest tightened. This wasn't right. She opened her mouth, but the explosion came first. A blast ripped the night apart. Fire, smoke, screams through the comms. The ground buckled beneath her. Her body slammed into dirt, ears ringing. When she staggered up, Lane was shouting, dragging another soldier from the rubble. The radios crackled, chaos. Ambush, south side, multiple casualties. Vega's pulse thundered. The commander's voice cut through, harsh, commanding. "Push forward, complete the mission." She froze. Push forward, with half the unit already bleeding, with the target compound still standing untouched. Her hands shook against her rifle. Lane looked at her, face streaked with dust and blood. "Orders, Vega, what the hell do we do?" She heard it then, the assets whisper threading through the chaos. Sometimes survival isn't obedience, sometimes it's defiance. Her eyes locked on Lane's, and for the first time she let the truth slip through her mask. "We pull back." Lane blinked. "That's—" "Look around," she snapped, voice cutting through the gunfire. "This isn't a mission, it's a setup." For a moment, silence clung between them, even with the battle raging. Then Lane nodded, sharp, decisive. And just like that, the fracture widened. Some followed orders, charging into the fire, into the trap. Others followed Vega, pulling back, dragging the wounded, refusing to walk into death. The night split in two. Gunfire raged, shouts echoed, dust choked the air. And in the middle of it all, Vega made her choice. Not the commander's, not the assets, hers. She carried Ortiz's ghost, the rookie, too. She carried the shame of yesterday, the doubt of tonight. But for once, she carried it on her own terms. By dawn, the survivors limped back to the compound, faces hollow, eyes bloodshot. The commander was waiting. His gaze swept the returning soldiers, counting, measuring. When his eyes found Vega, they lingered. There was no rage, no shouting, just silence. The kind that weighed more than words ever could. Vega stood there, dust covering her, rifle slung, eyes steady. She didn't flinch. Didn't explain. Didn't apologize. Because some truths weren't meant to be spoken. They were meant to be carried. The commander gave a single nod. Not approval, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. And for her, that was enough. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The sun broke over the horizon, washing the compound in pale light. Vega turned away, her shadow stretching long behind her. Not cleansed, not redeemed, still scarred, still haunted. But moving forward. And that was the courage she had left. The kind that rewrote stories not with glory, but with silence.